views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
Let me be your lighthouse so I can show you the way. Let me be your shining light, I'll keep you from drifting away. I'm the one that makes you try.
Today we have a special guest, Mr. Rod Taylor, who is the leader of the Christian Heritage Party in Canada. And thank you for joining us today, sir.
Well, thank you, Patty. Thank you for contacting me. I think when you first called, I was in Didsbury, Alberta, and or around there. And thanks for patiently waiting till I got home to conduct the interview.
What year was the Christian Heritage Party, or CHP, formed in and by whom?
Okay, there was a small group that met together around a ping pong table in Surrey, BC, British Columbia, back in 1986. Is when the party was registered. They collected signatures and formed the party, and it was primarily because they had worked in some of the larger political parties at the time, the Liberals and the Conservatives, and for pro-life and pro-family causes. And they had been disappointed so many times, even when they helped someone get elected, sometimes that person would not, they'd get to Ottawa and they would be compelled by political correctness and party discipline, and they would not always stand up for the things that our founders thought were important. So our founders said, let's start a political party based on Christian principles and values, and that it will always be pro-life and pro-family. So that was 1986. 1987 was the founding convention in Hamilton, Ontario. In 1988 was the first campaign in which the party ran candidates.
So the headquarters are now at...
Well, we have George Zekveld is our man in Ottawa who answers the phone there, receives our mail, and conducts a lot of our business, keeps us connected if we get questions from either voters, members, or from Elections Canada or anything like that. He's the one who handles all that. I'm in northern British Columbia, and our leader's office has generally followed the leader, wherever that leader has been. And so we have had leaders living in lower mainland of BC, in Nova Scotia, in Gatineau, Quebec, in Lethbridge, Alberta, and in Steinbach, Manitoba over the years. So the leader's office is generally where the leader lives. Right now, the leader's office is up here in northern British Columbia.
And what was his mission back then?
Well, the mission, and it's interesting how this question, because just last night our national board met by Zoom, as we do monthly, and we reviewed our mission statement and reaffirmed this mission statement. In our Constitution, it calls it the objectives, but it says the aim of the party is A, to provide true Christian leadership and to defend, promote, and uphold biblical principles in federal legislation. B, to gain seats in Parliament so we can have a direct influence on policy and policy changes. And C, to contend for and attain the leadership of the federal government of Canada through the existing democratic process. So kind of in that order, but the first thing is to provide true Christian leadership, to defend, promote, and uphold biblical principles in federal legislation. And a lot of that has to do with pro-life, pro-family, pro-freedom concepts.
Do you find people are becoming more aware of pro-life issues?
Yeah, in many ways, yes. I think, the advent of ultrasound and even the internet, social media has allowed a lot of information to be shared that, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago was not out there for people. The trouble is, of course, now the internet is facing censorship, and people who espouse, conservative social policies are not always don't always have the same access even to social media. But I think generally the awareness is higher today than it was 40 years ago.
There are restrictions before Biden came in about abortion and all that. And do you have restrictions in Canada at all?
No, actually, right now, today, it's sad to say there is not a single restriction on abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. Most people don't realize that. They think that there is still a doctor's committee that has to meet. They think maybe no abortions are allowed in the last 3 months. But in Canada, there is no legal reason why a child's life cannot be terminated right up to the moment of birth. And of course, it doesn't often happen that way. Most abortions take place early in the pregnancy, but it's still a child in the womb. And Canada has no laws whatsoever regarding abortion.
I think that's why your political party, CHP, is there to start putting limitations on abortion to stop it eventually, I hope. Right?
Absolutely. There's a conservative member of parliament, Kathy Wagenthal, out of Saskatchewan, and in the last session of parliament, she had a bill called the Selective Abortion Bill, which basically we know that in some places in Canada, babies are terminated simply because they are girls. And so, I mean, because there's no restriction for any reason whatsoever, but this bill would have made it illegal to terminate a child simply on the basis of its sex. And that bill, believe it or not, was rejected by the majority in the House of Commons, including the leader of the Conservative Party, Kathy Wagenthal's own leader. He did not support her bill. So, of course, the Conservatives are not in charge, but the Conservative Party as a whole did not support the bill. So we think members of all the parties should have supported it, whether they're NDP or Liberal or whatever. The idea that a baby could be killed because it's a girl, I mean, it's an atrocious concept, but that's the way it is in our country today.
Stating back in the Old Testament, I mean, Baal, sacrificing the children, it goes, way back, but I thought we would be more civilized in this day and age. I guess I was wrong.
There is that illusion that humankind is improving in its morality and general sense of dignity and respect, but I don't know if there's any evidence to demonstrate that. We had in the last century, of course, we had the National Socialists or the Nazis in Germany.
Yeah.
We've had communism, and so human nature is by nature immoral. We have a tendency to do things that are not right, and we need laws, moral laws, and of course we need personal convictions that will keep us in the right track.
Because of Satan, we have sin.
Yep.
There's sin here in this world, and that's why we have to fight it constantly with God's help.
Yeah, with God's help, that's exactly right.
So, can anyone join your party?
We do have a membership statement on our membership form. It says, "I agree with the following." I believe there's one Creator God, the God of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
The Canadian Charter, I believe the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms acknowledges the supremacy of God and the rule of law. I believe all innocent human life must be protected by law from conception to natural death. I believe marriage is the exclusive union of one man and one woman.
Mm-hmm.
I believe parents are the primary authority for the care and education of their children. And I believe that Canadian laws must reflect biblical moral standards. So, if people don't believe those things, they probably wouldn't have a reason to join the party. We have had some non-Christians or non-believers have joined in the past. One particular one that I remember in my district, a gentleman, he was a World War II veteran. He was in a wheelchair, missing one leg. And he said, I'm not religious. That's almost the first thing he told me. I'm not religious. But as we talked, he said, you know what? I risked my life for my country, and now I'm losing my country. He said, I like what you folks stand for. And he and his wife joined the party, and they became very loyal friends and supporters. So we believe that our policies would be good for all Canadians, regardless of their faith stand.
How many leaders have you had since 1988?
Yeah, well, we've had 6 elected leaders and then 2 interim leaders in between. So, yeah, Ed Van Woudenberg was our founding leader. He was one of the men and women around around the ping pong table who said we need to have our own party, and he led the party. He's inspired a lot of people. He set the framework for the party. And then we had Ron Gray for 13 years, and he lived part of the time in British Columbia, part of the time in Gatineau, Quebec, and he was really a person who helped the party develop, I guess, mature, become better at communicating our message. Jim Natchik, just before I became leader, Jim Natchik from Nova Scotia led the party for 5.5 years. And I served as his deputy leader. And then after he stepped down in the next, that year, I was elected leader in 2014.
What are your duties as the leader?
Well, I guess the main thing I do is to serve as the face of the party, the spokesperson for the party. I speak to the public about our policies and principles. I write or participate in writing our weekly communique, which anyone can get, by the way. If you go on our website, chp.ca, you can subscribe to our weekly communique. I write some of them and others write some of them, but I have basically at least an editorial hand in them all as they go out. I conduct a weekly interview. I have been doing that with former Deputy Leader Peter Vogel. He's moved on to other ministry right now, other tasks, but so we do a weekly interview, something like this with folks that we call. I travel frequently to across the country to meet with members and Electoral District Association gatherings. I represent the party at meetings of Elections Canada's Advisory Committee of Political Parties, the ACPP, and I sit on various committees within the party, our policy committee, communications committee, elections readiness, a national board, and now we're having a convention committee because we have a convention coming up in Calgary in September.
Ah, so how often is there an election?
Well, that varies in Canada, not like the United States.
Every 4 years here.
Yeah, you can pretty well count on timing of your election. Our elections are somewhat subject to the whims of the Prime Minister. And right now, our last election was less than 2 years ago, but our Prime Minister appears to be, manipulating things to conduct an election in either August or leading into the fall. We're not sure, and that's the thing nobody knows, but we are getting ready for a potential election.
He's not doing anything to help our babies, is he?
Oh, no. And I think the reason everyone assumes that the Prime Minister will call an election this year rather than next year is he's handing out a lot of our grandchildren's money right now, or basically borrowed money, what they call CERB payments, so-called helping people get through the COVID crisis. And of course, people appreciate getting a handout. They don't stop and think that it's not the PM's money. It's coming from our grandchildren. Yeah. And next year, he may have to cut those off. He may have to raise taxes. Our national debt has risen in the past year to over $1 trillion.
Wow.
Last time I checked, we were paying about $56 million a day in interest on our national debt. And of course, we think that there's a lot better uses for $56 million a day other than just paying interest charges. So,
Mercy for heavens. Hope we don't go into bankrupt.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, you know, if people don't understand, the word of God says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So where there's no fear of the Lord, I say there's no wisdom. And unfortunately, people that look at life from a secular materialist point of view, you know, I mean, he just figures that you can keep borrowing money and throwing it around. Actually, buying votes with our grandchildren's money is, if you want to put it in blunt terms, and
Taking
it's
food out of our mouths.
yeah,
Uh, Bob and I are living in the United States. Well, we're still Canadian. People from abroad who are Canadian living in other countries, they can still vote for you.
yes, and I've never looked deeply into that, but I believe you can vote in the district that you lived in when you left Canada, wherever you were living in Canada, the district electoral district. I believe that's where you're allowed to vote for the next member of
That's what
parliament.
we do for Calgary area. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
You promote the right to life from conception to natural death. And how about protecting life for vulnerable Canadians like handicap as well as seniors? Is euthanasia rampant there as well in Canada again?
Yes, euthanasia was legalized in 2016. It was in the first year that Prime Minister Trudeau took over with the Liberal government. They passed the bill allowing a doctor, well, they call it medical aid in dying, but it's physician-assisted suicide, and it's a terrible thing. Many Canadians in their senior years in Canada do not have access to true palliative care, comfort care.
Uh-uh.
And it is, I believe that part of this is driven by money. It's cheaper to kill people than it is to look after them in their senior years. Of course, that's not
Care.
how they,
The population of Canada, they should care if something happens to them or their parents or their babies.
yeah.
Are they that blind?
Well, of course, they don't spin it as a cost control measure. They spin it as personal dignity. People living in pain, you know, can escape their pain and so on. But there have been cases where they will offer someone medical assistance in dying, and they will, instead of paying for a service that they actually would require that would make their life better. And the worst case situation I can tell you about is in British Columbia, the Delta Hospice Society in
Mhm.
Delta, BC. We know the lady who runs that, Angelina Ireland, wonderful person. They have a 10-bed facility there designed for palliative care for those in their last stages of life. And they do not want, at that Delta Hospice Society, they refused to participate in the medical assistance in dying programs. And the government of BC, which is a new Democrat, NDP, we call them, they're socialists, they forced, basically, they seized the facility. They stole the $8.5 million facility from the Delta Hospice Society. They said, if you're not going to kill people here, you can no longer operate this facility. They took it away from them. And of course,
Killing
they're fighting that in court. But the reality is, the governments seem to want everyone to do the same thing. They, you know, instead of saying, because a mile down the road, you can see from the windows of the Irene Thomas Hospice, which
people.
operated, you could see the Delta Hospital where they do euthanasia, and there was no reason to force this little facility to participate in that. But that's, the government wants everybody to do the same thing.
Oh, they want control.
Exactly.
Death
So,
culture. That's what I call it.
and
We have to reverse it.
this year, the Canadian Parliament, under this Liberal government, but with the support of other parties, made it legal. They added mental illness as one of the categories under which people could seek doctor-assisted suicide. So, you know, someone might be having a bad day and going through a period of depression. Instead of helping them come out of that, giving them a reason to live, the government says, well, if you want to end it all, you can. And so we're really upset about that.
When did all this start? How many years ago? 60s, the 50s? God,
I don't know
when it started to not
when that particular thing, I think that our country has been going down the rabbit trail away from biblical morality, and the dignity of life has been going in this direction for some time, decades for sure. But
yeah.
yeah,
That is
go ahead.
why you're here, to start turning that spiraling down, to
Yeah.
go back up again, to be a proud country and caring country for their own people.
Yeah, exactly. See, there was an omnibus bill. I can't tell you what year it was in, but under the reign of former Prime Minister Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the father of our current Prime Minister,
Right.
back in the 80s. And that bill made abortion legal. It decriminalized homosexual behavior. And some of these things started back then. I would say that was kind of the beginning of the end. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it's different than your United States Constitution. Our Canadian Constitution is not a single document. It's our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the British North America Act of 1867, and it's judicial precedent. And so in this omnibus bill, a number of these things came into being, and now precedent has been set. And so, although our Charter of Rights and Freedoms has in the preamble, it says Canada is founded on principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law.
It ain't working.
It seems like the courts do not pay much attention to that, nor do politicians in the big parties.
They're going willy-nilly. They don't care what happens to their people as long as they get the money and power. That's what I see down here as well as in Canada.
So we need national repentance. We need a revival. We need people to recognize that, God's ways are better than our ways. His thoughts are better than our thoughts. And if we would, as a nation, submit to his dominion, in fact, on the Peace Tower in our Parliament buildings is the biblical phrase etched in stone: "He shall have dominion from sea to sea." And if Canadians would live that way, our country would be a lot better off.
CHP, or Christian Heritage Party. What do you see in the future for it?
Well, unless the nation turns, our society, both in the United States and in Canada, I think we're kind of lockstep in different things. The society has abandoned a biblical worldview and has rejected biblical morality. With this, we've had a tragic breakdown of families, our economy, our health, our productivity, and our land. I use this biblical phrase: our land is polluted with innocent blood. The killing of the unborn, which in Canada amounts to about 4 million.
There's no excuse. There is no excuse for killing our babies.
No.
Whatsoever. What's wrong?
And God, I think, is holding us accountable. It has not gone unnoticed.
Right.
With the one who created us. He's the creator of heaven and earth. He made us, each one of us, in his image. Mm-hmm. And he wants us to honor and glorify him and to celebrate human life, not to destroy it. And
these are my own thoughts, but the way the weather and the heat and the earthquakes, I think that's God trying to tell us something. Don't you think so? Or
I totally agree. We can't expect his blessing on our crops, our cities, our economy, our health, our national security, if we reject him and his wisdom. So he's holding us accountable. And, always there's a time when there's warning signs out there, when we see things beginning to crumble. God gives us the opportunity to come back to him, to return to his wisdom and his ways. And I think we're calling. I think sometimes we see ourselves as the watchman on the wall blowing the trumpet, a prophetic voice in the Canadian political scene. And nothing would make us happier than to see the other parties even and other candidates, other political leaders adopt the policies that we're putting forward. We just want to see Canada get back on its feet and to abandon this downward trajectory.
More power to you, sir.
Thank you.
You have a lot of people in your party.
Well, we have a lot of good people in our party. Of course, we would like it to be bigger. We are growing, not as fast as we would like, but I think as people, especially right now this year, the Conservative Party has disappointed so many of its members. There are a lot of people that vote based on party lines. They vote for the Conservatives because they want to get rid of the Liberals, right? And they, even if they're disappointed in the party leadership, they say, well, at least this, it won't be as bad as Trudeau. But I think a lot of people are waking up now and saying, no, we actually have to vote for what we want, not just against what we don't want. And so we are like the leader of the Conservative Party, Mr. Aaron O'Toole, in this past year, he voted against the sex-selective abortion bill, for instance.
Yeah.
In other words, he said it's okay to keep on killing baby girls in the womb. He voted in favor of Bill C-6, which is called the conversion therapy ban. It would make it illegal to counsel a young person who wants to leave a gender confused lifestyle and get back to
gender confusing.
Yeah. And so now that bill has not become law because it didn't get through the Senate. It has to go through the House of Commons and then through the Senate. And Parliament was recessed over the summer. So that bill right now has not become law. But if it passes into law, it could be illegal for parents even to counsel their own children about gender confusion. It could be illegal for a pastor to counsel a parishioner who is wanting help escaping a lifestyle of gender confusion. And so, and of course, the big thing overshadowing a lot of this right now is censorship on the internet and so on, where people like us and others who have similar views. Right now, we're feeling it on social media, but Prime Minister Trudeau wants to make it illegal. They call it hate speech, but they will be the ones defining what hate speech is. And it could be biblical morality expressed, in a media post or whatever. And the government, if they have the power, they would want to be able to only allow people who agree with them to express themselves on the internet. So that also did not pass yet. The Senate did not pass that. And if the government calls an election, that bill will not become law. They would have to start over again. So that would be one benefit of having an election now. But of course, if they get a majority again, if they come back with a majority, they will pass whatever they want, foolish and harmful legislation.
This is towards the end of the show. I'd like to have you on again. We have so much to talk about, sir.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to your listeners. And it's been good to meet you today face-to-face through Zoom. Really appreciate you taking the time and the interest to give me a call.
This is Patty Hunter of Patty's Page. Thank you, sir, Mr. Rod Taylor of Christian Heritage Party.
Godspeed, my love, until we meet again. You're always in my heart and every dream. Don't let this time apart give in to all our fears. God will keep us close from up above. So until we meet again, Godspeed.